It's really good. Why are you using potatoes? Because they aren't keto.
Hi guys, welcome back to CJ's Keto Kitchen. If you are looking for home-style recipes made ketogenic, then you've come to the right place. Tonight we are making a keto comfort classic, and it is going to be turkey pot pie. So come along with me and let's get started. In keeping with my tradition on making something to utilize your Thanksgiving leftovers, this year I decided to make turkey pot pie. It came out savory and delicious, and you're going to love it. Let's get started. So you are going to want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees. So here are the ingredients that we're going to need for tonight's recipe. So for our crust on our pot pie, you're going to need almond flour, 2 egg whites, a half a cup of cheese. I'm using Swiss because we had it left over from the Brussels sprout casserole, but you could use any kind of cheese that you like. Salt, about a teaspoon, 6 tablespoons of softened butter. For the filling in our pot pie, you are of course going to need turkey because it is a turkey pot pie. You could just as easily use chicken if you were making this at another time, or if you don't prefer turkey for your holidays. And this is about 2 pounds cut up and cooked. I have 1 cup of chopped mushrooms. I have the 1 cup of turnips that we chopped up earlier, and that's going to replicate our potatoes in this. I have an extremely small amount of peas and carrots. Before the keto police get called out, I want you to know that the macros are very good. There's a lot of fiber in this. We're using an extremely small amount, and it is going to be a large pot pie. You need 1.5 cups of chicken broth. This happens to be bone broth, but use whatever you have. We have our seasonings, and we'll discuss that during the recipe. You're going to need some xanthan gum. I'm going to be using 2 fresh herbs for this recipe. I have chopped up thyme, and I have chopped up sage. You are also going to need some kind of baking dish or pie pan. Because the recipe that I am loosely referencing is from the pioneer woman, Ree Drummond, I'm going to be using one of her baking dishes. She is my absolute favorite as far as kitchen utensils. I just love her style, so I'm going to be using one of her baking dishes. You are also going to need 2 silicone mats or parchment paper of a similar size and a rolling pin for making the crust of our pot pie. You are going to need a Dutch oven or a large pot to make our filling for our pot pie. And in my Dutch oven, I already have 1 tablespoon waiting for sauteing our ingredients. So we are going to want to make the crust, the top, for our pot pie because we are going to need to let that dough sit in the refrigerator for 5 or 10 minutes while we are making the filling of our turkey pot pie. So that's where we are going to begin tonight. So you are going to need 2 cups of almond flour. I have just lightly whisked mine just to get some of the lumps out. You are going to want to salt your flour. I have about a teaspoon of salt. We are going to begin cutting this softened butter into our flour. You can use a hand mixer, you can use a pastry blender, you can use your fingers, whatever you would like. Generally, when I cut butter into a flour, it is very cold. But in this case, you need softened butter. You don't want it melted, but you do want room temperature. And I have 6 tablespoons here. So I'm going to begin cutting the butter in now. So I'm just cleaning my pastry blender as I go to get the excess butter and flour off of it so that I continue to use it as a tool. And I will show you the texture here in just a moment. So you can see that it has become sandy and there are chunks of butter, and that's great because when it hits the oven temperature, it is going to produce steam, which is going to cause our crust to puff up, and that is what we want it to do. Okay, so our flour and our butters have combined. We are now going to put our 2 egg whites in. And I'm just going to stir that around so that we start combining to make a dough. So the final thing that I'm going to be putting in is our 1/2 cup of cheese. Remember, I'm using Swiss here, but you can use any kind of cheese that you like. I am simply using up what I already have. Okay, so there is our dough. So you're going to need 2 silicone mats or 2 pieces of parchment paper that are fairly large because we are going to be rolling this out to cover the top of our baking dish. Mine happens to be 2 quarts. You could use a pie pan if you preferred. So I'm just going to take my dough and put it on the bottom parchment. And if you need to wet or grease your hands a little bit to make it a little bit more malleable, you can definitely do that. I'm going to place the second sheet over the top. I'm going to take my rolling pin and start trying to roll this in as thin a layer as I possibly can without it being too thin. And silicone or parchment paper makes it so much easier to do this. We are going to be chilling this dough a little bit before we use it, and that will further make it a bit malleable. And I'm just trying to replicate the overall shape of my baking dish. If you were planning on using a pie dish that was in a different shape, then of course you could try and make this a little bit more like a circle. And then you can just kind of check on it a little bit. It is going to help to chill it for sure. Okay? So I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to pop it into my refrigerator while we make the filling of our turkey pot pie. So let's begin our filling. In our Dutch oven, we are going to start with our tablespoon of butter, and to that I'm going to add both the mushrooms. Remember, it's 1 cup, and the turnip, also 1 cup. And we're just going to let those saute for a moment and soften a bit. I cut these turnips up in advance. I peeled them first. And I tried to find turnips that were smaller in size because I have found through personal experience that the smaller ones tend to be a little less pungent and a lot more mild, and in that way adequately mimic potatoes a little bit better. So we are going to put in our chicken broth now. This is 1.5 cups. We are also going to put in our 2 ounces of softened cream cheese. We also have our 1/4 cup of heavy cream. And while we are waiting for our cream cheese to incorporate itself, we can start adding our seasonings. I'm putting in some garlic powder. I'm also doing some Trader Joe's 21 seasoning salute. I'm going to be putting some poultry seasoning in, since we are using turkey. I want a little bit of salt. The last seasoning that I'm going to be putting in is just about 1/4 teaspoon of ground turmeric. And this just is going to help give our broth a little bit of a savory color. It makes it really pretty and golden. The last thing that I'm going to put in before I put the lid on it and let it simmer for a minute or 2 is our fresh herbs. So once again, I have about a teaspoon of fresh thyme and about a teaspoon of fresh sage. Use whatever fresh herbs you enjoy, or you can omit the fresh herbs and just go with dried herbs. But I really love fresh herbs for the holidays, and I really think it makes a huge difference in how your food tastes. So I'm just going to put the lid on and I'm going to let this simmer for just a few minutes. So we are ready to add add our final couple of ingredients into our filling before we put it into our casserole and bake it. So I am going to add my turkey. Remember, this is 2 pounds of your leftover turkey, which is why we did this recipe, because it's Thanksgiving leftovers. But once again, if you're making this at another time, you can absolutely use chicken or beef or whatever you have. We are also going to add our 1/2 cup of peas and carrots. So as a final step for our filling, I'm going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum. It is just going to add a little bit of thickness to our sauce, to our filling, so that it's a little bit thick when we bake it. But you do want to do this with the heat off. You can see that our heat is off. And I'm just going to sprinkle it here in the broth area. And I'm just going to combine that. Now I'm going to heat this just a bit more. So I'm turning my heat back on now that we have the xanthan gum in. And I'm just going to heat it for just a minute. And then we will get our crust out of the refrigerator and top this turkey pot pie. So our filling is now complete. I have turned the heat off on my stove, and I am going to transfer our filling into the casserole dish. I'm going to attempt to transfer my filling into the casserole dish. It looks beautiful just like that. But we are going to get our pastry out and put a beautiful warm keto blanket on the top. Yes, theoretically, you could let the filling cool before you put this crust on top. But I'm impatient and I want to eat dinner, so I'm going to put the crust on right now. My cameraman and I have been having a debate about whether we should cool this or not, and the consensus is that we need to eat dinner, so we're going to put it on right now. So wish us luck. If you would like to chill the filling or cool the filling before you put the crust on, you absolutely can. Oh no, we'll see. I'm very carefully trying to remove this from my silicone mat and get it on top of my pot pie. Just very slowly doing this. Now remember that almond flour has no gluten in it, so there is no stretch at all. So you want to be very patient and just carefully work it, remembering that you can always patch things with a little bit of wet fingers when we get done. You can see I have a piece there that did not fully work. So I am going to get myself a little bowl of water so I can patch. We are going to try patch this here spot. That's why I love silicone so much, is I can't even imagine doing this without it. Well, and the good thing about pot pie is that it is supposed to be very rustic, so. All right, Not too bad here. Okay, so I'm going to take my damp fingers again and just kind of press that. And now this is not going to matter when it bakes because it's going to be brown and bubbly and beautiful. All fixed. I'm going to cut a couple of slits in it to let the steam escape from our filling. Now the last thing that I'm going to do is I am going to brush this with a little bit of egg wash. So I'll be right back. So this is just a little bit of egg and some water. And I'm just going to use a pastry brush and I'm just going to brush the top really lightly with this. And this is going to assist it in getting nice and golden brown. And it's a good way to use up the yolk of the egg that we did not use for our pastry. Okay, so she is ready to go into the oven. Put this baby in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes at 375. Okay. So my pot pie has been in for approximately 30 minutes. It ended up taking 30 minutes for my oven. And now I'm going to remove it and I'm going to let it sit on the counter for probably about 10 to 15 minutes so that it's not the temperature of the surface of the sun. So there it is, homemade turkey pot pie. I'm gonna put it on the counter, baby. I just hadn't put a... Okay, here is our delicious post-Thanksgiving turkey pot pie. Hi.
Hi.
It's time to get your leftovers on for some turkey pot pie.
Sure. All right. Well, that looks really good.
Smells good.
Why are you using potatoes? They aren't keto. This is really good. Wow, it's a big hug of keto comfort. This is really good. And I would not know that these are turnips. These are turnips, right?
That is correct.
I wouldn't know that because I don't taste. In fact, they have the consistency of potatoes when you eat them. And I'm not just saying that because I'm at Cjsketokitchen or whatever. I'm saying that they're good. I would not know that these were not potatoes. I do see an illegal pea. So I know the keto police have you on a wanted poster.
Yes.
Considering how big this dish is, I think a quarter of a cup or half a cup.
Half a cup. Yeah.
I think a half a cup
But it's not
of
all peas. It's some carrot too. So
Peas and
you probably
carrot.
have about 10 peas. Maybe.
I have no carrots whatsoever.
Okay.
So I don't think I'm concerned about the little bit of peas and carrots that you put in this dish.
Good.
But you know what people can always do? They don't have to put it in.
That is correct.
So anyway, if you're a keto purist and you don't want to see peas and carrots, you can omit that. But it's really good, really flavorful, and good job, baby. I think you did a good job explaining to people how to do this.
Thank you.
You made it look easy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.